Saturday, March 15, 2025 may have seemed unremarkable to most Americans, but history will remember it as Black Saturday, the day the United States ceased to function as a constitutional democracy. That morning, a federal judge issued a lawful court order. The President of the United States refused to comply. No appeal, no enforcement, no institutional response. The judiciary was defied, and nothing happened. This was not just defiance. It was a constitutional orphaning, a vacuum where law should command power, but power stood unbound. For the first time in modern American history, a sitting president ignored a federal court ruling without consequence. No marshal, no department, no enforcement. This wasn't a clash of co-equal branches, it was a revelation. The judiciary without force is just a suggestion box. And the presidency without limits is no longer bound by law. Trump didn't declare the end of constitutional order. He didn't need to. He demonstrated it, not in volume, but in vacancy. Black Saturday wasn't the end. It was the moment democracy became optional. Not chaos, but control. Not erosion, but erasure. We know now that moment didn't pass. It metastasized. 2 weeks later, the courts responded. But power had already moved on, and a man disappeared. Kilmar Garcia, a legal U.S. resident, was granted protection by an immigration judge in 2019. But on March 15th, despite a federal restraining order, he was deported to El Salvador. His removal wasn't a bureaucratic slip. It was a constitutional rupture. According to Human Rights Watch, the prison system where Garcia now resides holds thousands in unsanitary, overcrowded conditions. Cells with no light, standing sewage, no legal access. Garcia's family, according to legal filings, has not heard from him since. On April 16th, the U.S. District Court declared the deportation illegal. Judge James Boasberg found a willful disregard of judicial authority and warned that allowing officials to annul court orders would make a solemn mockery of the Constitution itself. The Supreme Court later vacated the restraining order on procedural grounds, but unanimously affirmed that individuals must be granted habeas corpus access before removal. The violation wasn't hypothetical. It is now judicially confirmed. Garcia is not alone. Under the Alien Enemies Act, dozens of others have been deported. In March 2025, the Department of Homeland Security disclosed that 75% had no criminal record. Some were deported in error. At least one was labeled an administrative mistake. None have been returned. During a televised Oval Office meeting, President Trump praised Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele for expanding prisons. Then he said, "We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals, absolute monsters. I'd like to include them." Bukele nodded as Trump added, "You'll have to be looking at the laws on that." The message was unmistakable. Citizenship no longer guarantees protection, and constitutional limits now bend, not at the feet of the law, but at the will of the executive. Think about that. The one thing we believe made us untouchable may no longer matter. When courts are ignored, law becomes decorative. Justice becomes a slogan. The threat isn't chaos. It's discretion masquerading as law. Law firms that challenge Trump lose access to federal contracts. Former officials like Chris Krebs face government harassment. Peaceful protesters are subdued by force. At one point, confirmed by his own defense secretary, Trump asked, "Can't you just shoot them in the legs?" This isn't lawlessness, it's authoritarian legalism. The Constitution wasn't torn in half, it was rewritten in invisible ink. The rule of law didn't vanish, it became optional, and then weaponized. Since Trump's return to power, foreign arrivals dropped 9.6% in March 2025, International Trade Administration. Nearly $20 billion in retail tourism losses are projected, Bloomberg Intelligence. Goldman Sachs warns of $90 billion in GDP at risk due to boycott pressure. The 10-year Treasury yield rose to 4.48% as of April 11th, Advisor Perspectives. The U.S. dollar has depreciated nearly 10% since January, The Times, UK. The country isn't projecting strength, it's hemorrhaging credibility. Trump now uses emergency tariff powers to punish critics and reward allies. Insider trades followed a recent tariff pause, sparking calls from Sen. Adam Schiff for a market manipulation probe. In Trump v. United States 2024, the Supreme Court granted presidents sweeping immunity for official acts. The decision didn't just shield misconduct, it codified impunity. Trump understood the assignment. So when the court ordered the return of Kilmar Garcia, he ignored it, repeatedly, publicly. No enforcement followed, no plan to comply. because none was required. This is no longer theoretical. The government's arguments, national security, Article 2 immunity, were rejected outright. No man can be judge in his own case, no matter how exalted his station or righteous his motives. Chief Judge James Boasberg. This is the first known finding of probable criminal contempt against a sitting U.S. president for violating a federal court order. Even as the injunction was vacated, the detainee's constitutional rights were reaffirmed. The court was not confused, it was defied, and it said so. Since that moment, the collapse has widened. The Supreme Court continues to be ignored. Immigration raids expand. Protest enforcement intensifies. ICE now publicly mocks deportees, and Trump repeats his proposal to deport U.S. citizens. I'd like to include them. You'll have to be looking at the laws on that. Some say this is alarmism, that America has endured worse, that systems self-correct. But collapse is not cinematic, it is procedural. One ruling ignored, one prisoner left abroad, one law obeyed by some, but not by power. The system didn't fail, it adapted, not to law, to power. We now live in a government where law is conditional and power is absolute. We have entered the era of optional law. That was all it took. This is not a partisan emergency, it is a civic one. The Constitution is not a suggestion, the court's rulings are not optional, and power, if it is to remain accountable, must once again be bound by law. Unless future administrations restore enforcement, rulings will remain symbolic, and freedom discretionary. The Supreme Court ordered the return of a man deported in error. The president said no, that was the line, and we are already past it. Please subscribe to the Intellectualist new YouTube channel where we present insightful videos analyzing the current events shaping the world. Turn on notifications to receive the latest updates from the channel.